Good evening. It's 6 o'clock, so I think we'd better start. Our numbers are very few, so maybe more people will be joining us as we go on. Who knows? I hope so, but if not, it is being recorded. Um, We've got quite a bit to get through, and I know time is precious, so I am going to start even though the numbers are low. Thank you, those of you who have said in the chat where you are coming from. It's always interesting from us. Oh, someone from the Wirral, up from where I'm from Liverpool proper, not the Wirral. You're in the posh bit. I was in the not so posh bit, and I've lived in northwest London, so bit of all local people for me. Lovely. Well, I'll get cracking and hopefully more people will join us. But welcome to our fourth webinar in the series. And tonight we're going to talk all about technology to overcome writing difficulties. And Nat, can I just check this is being recorded? Is that right? Yes, I can see it is. Wonderful. So technology to overcome writing difficulties. And as I said, this is our fourth webinar. The first one was generic about why it's hard for learners that struggle with literacy. We then looked at how to stop dyslexic learners underperforming in exams, and that was really looking at these older students, whereas the first webinar was looking at any age student. And then we said, well, in order to have children set up for success in exams, what needs to be in place further down the school? So our last webinar was all about how to overcome or using technology to help overcome reading difficulties. And tonight we're going to talk about overcoming writing difficulties. And then the next time we get together next month, we're going to talk about memory and self-esteem. So if you have missed any of the previous webinars, then all is not lost. We have this website. So if you click on the link when we send you the slides, you can get in and you can look at all the past webinars which are here and the existing webinars, well, there'll only be one left after tonight. So that's where you can find out more information. And it would just be helpful for me to know how much time I need to devote to recapping. If you could tell me in the chat which of these webinars you've seen. Now, you could have seen them live, you could have seen them recorded, I don't mind. But if you could just put 1, 2, 3, or just 2, or just 3 in the chat, and then I have an idea of how much I need to recoup or recap. So we've got somebody that's just been to 3. Oh, we've got someone from Johannesburg. Welcome. Don't know what time it is over there. So far I've only seen a 3. I'm hoping if you've seen none, just say none, but then I know what I'm dealing with. None, okay. Yeah, I do go over them quickly, but it's still worthwhile going back. What I do is I do the minimum in the recap that you can still understand what I'm talking about. But I'm going to do a similar recap tonight. So let me just check. So it looks like you need a recap. So we'll spend a bit of time on a recap. And then in the chat, it's also helpful for me to know your role and the age of the children you joined all sessions. Well done. And you're a teacher and you look after 8-year-olds, which is great. Thank you for letting me know that. Was that the lady from South Africa? Yes, it was. You ought to get in touch with me because I know that South Africa, well, I'm told that South Africa doesn't have as much to support, and I might be able to help you with some of my online tools because that excites me, being able to help people in far-flung places as well as the UK. So parent, 12-year-old, that's helpful to know. And I'm not seeing much else, but if you could type on there, but I will keep an eye on that and continue as I do the recap because I do think it looks like we need it. So we are going to recap why learning's hard, technology to help in exams and to overcome reading difficulties. So in the very first session, I talked about the fact that KUDYT is a collaboration between Kingston University and the Driver Youth Trust. So I work for Kingston University, but the Driver Youth Trust, which is a charity that's got a lot of experience in helping teachers help students overcome literacy difficulties. And we have the tagline of empowering educators, unlocking literacy and transforming lives. And that's my purpose, and that is the purpose of the collaboration. And why do we need to do that? Because in any class, 1 in 5 students struggle with literacy. And we've looked in previous webinars about this tension between literacy and intelligence and how we've got them so intertwined that a lot of people are judging a child's intelligence by their literacy, which means an awful lot of intelligence is missed. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But this does result in ridiculous underachievement. And we really want to help teachers be more inclusive because we believe that transforms outcomes and improves society. So in the first webinar we did, this actually says 4 simulations, one in reading automaticity, working memory, visual memory, and writing automaticity. There's actually a 5th one in there, was to do with attention as well, what it's like when you have attention difficulties. So that's the first webinar, and I do recommend going back and having a look at that, because I think until you experience what it is like to be a child at school that has problems with reading or writing or memory, it's harder to accommodate. It's harder to make teaching and learning inclusive because you don't understand firsthand. So I really do recommend going back, because you can watch the video and get the same information. So on the first webinar, we also looked at typical dyslexic weaknesses. And I'm not saying these are all the dyslexic weaknesses, but these are the typical ones that people would know. And we looked at the attainment gap. So we looked at a timeline and we said, as time goes on and as the children learn to read and then need to read in order to learn and then write to be assessed, then what tends to happen is this attainment gap gets bigger and bigger. And at the beginning of school, the neurotypical and the neuroatypical, the neurodiverse child would be about the same, with messy time and water play and, sitting on the carpet and talking. But as the needs to read and write get bigger and bigger, this attainment gap gets bigger. But we also looked at dyslexic strengths, and it's very, very easy to look at dyslexia just from a deficit point of view. But there are many, many strengths with dyslexia. And if you think of Bloom's taxonomy, if we look at the higher order thinking skills, they equate very well with our typical dyslexic strengths. So if that's the case, we should be seeing dyslexics do very well academically. We certainly shouldn't see, what is the case, is them underperforming. So what I'm hoping with this series of webinars and training trainee teachers is to equip these students such that they can get those minimal entry requirements that will enable them to get into the higher educational or the further educational establishments where their gifts and their higher order thinking can really, really shine. And in this webinar series, I'm particularly looking at technology, because that's my background. That's what I use to help my own children. Now, I don't think technology on its own is enough, but I do think this is the area where we can have lots and lots of easy and quick wins, because a lot of schools already own the technology. They've paid for it. It's in the classrooms, it's in the homes, but people aren't using it to best advantage. So I really want to shout about how they can use the technology they already have to help students that struggle with literacy achieve what they need to. And we started in the second webinar of thinking about those all important exams, those English GCSEs, those history GCSEs, any GCSE that requires students to write essays. And we looked at the exam hall, and we looked at the fact that the current exam system really discriminates against learners that are dyslexic or struggle with literacy. And we said that the best thing that could happen is that these students were able to use a computer reader in exams and a word processor. And I'd really recommend going back and watching that webinar, which shows you the difference that can be made if you have a computer reader and a word processor to exam results. And it is not an exaggeration to say students can go from a D to an A if they have these in place. And the other thing that I shared, which I think is super important, is all the JCQ requirements, because it is not that hard to be able to use a computer reader or a word processor. It's much easier than getting the 25% extra time. So again, that I went into in great detail in the second webinar. And we also looked at the number of schools that are using these access arrangements. And we saw that there are far more getting extra time than using a computer reader. And it's actually an easier access arrangement to get, but I just don't think schools are equipped, they have the knowledge in order to have this up here as well, and having students benefit from these great access arrangements. So they're just the statistics of who are using these access arrangements. We then said, well, okay, if we're going to have a computer reader in exams, what needs to be in place, or be a laptop user, what needs to be in place earlier in the school? And I just use this infographic to explain that if we are going to have these for GCSEs, you can't just expect 15-year-olds to start using them, 3 months, 6 months before they do their exams. It is absolutely critical, and this is what it says in all the JCQ requirements, is it has to be the student's normal way of working. And that's not just bureaucracy, that's not the JCQ throwing their weight around. It would not be in the student's best interest to only introduce this technology very, very late. It would actually be detrimental. So what do we need to have in place in order to use a word processor? Well, students need to know how to type, and ideally touch type. And I talked about why touch typing over regular typing. And if I was to summarize that very briefly, if you're a great speller, then regular typing is fine as long as you're fast. But if you're not a good speller, touch typing is worth its weight in gold. As a terrible speller myself, I'm very grateful that I can touch type. But not only typing, we also need to show students how to use dictation. Now, this might be because they're too young to learn to type, and I do think there are disadvantages of trying to get children to type too young when they don't have the maturity or the dexterity. But I also think once students have learned to type, this is a winning combination, being able to dictate and type coursework. But from the computer reader point of view, if you're going to use a computer reader in exams, then you need to be very accustomed to using text-to-speech and read aloud functionality. So you need to have been listening to electronic textbooks and notes as you do your revision. You need to be using text-to-speech for web pages and worksheets. And a really good thing to do earlier down the school to get students used to taking information audibly, not just visually, is to listen to audiobooks for pleasure, to use immersive reading. And I showed you immersive reading in the last webinar. And also to use technology just to learn to read. The intervention solutions are absolutely brilliant when it comes to teaching children how to read, how to spell. So I really do recommend those. So that's what we need to have set up further down the school. And in the last webinar, we particularly looked at how to change fonts to be dyslexia friendly and how to have just about everything read aloud. So the student isn't hindered by their lack of reading skills. And then we looked at a quick package, Nessie Reading and Spelling it was, on learning to read, and also reading for pleasure, which is super important. I can't stress enough how important it is for children to enjoy reading for pleasure. And if it's read aloud and you don't have to decode each word, it's far more pleasurable for students that enjoy reading for pleasure. And I know I've got all my children listening to books. I personally listen to books all the time, and my life is so much richer as a result. So that is the end of the recap, and we have taken up a fair bit of time. So now let's just look at writing difficulties. And every last single piece of work that our children write has two components. They have, well, how they write it and what they write. And the what also has two components. So they have all their ideas, whether they've answered the problem, whether they've understood the problem. So their answers, but then you've got the literacy aspect. You know, are they using correct punctuation? Are they using correct grammar? Are they spelling words correctly? So that what they write falls into these two categories. And when I'm working with my students and my trainee teachers, I am talking to them a lot about this. But tonight we're going to be talking about transcription, how they write. So what I'm going to be looking at tonight is how we can ensure that this is our students' normal way of working if they struggle with writing. So we're going to look at technology to overcome difficulties with writing. And the first thing I'm going to look at is typing. And I personally say touch typing because just about all the students I work with struggle with spelling like me, and therefore touch typing is better. Now, touch typing isn't easy. It needs to be taught. You can't just put a child in front of a teach yourself package and expect them to learn to type, because it's using muscle memory and it's doing what doesn't come naturally. It's like not looking at the keyboard and using your little finger. You know, what else do you use these for? Absolutely nothing. So it doesn't come naturally. But look at the keyboard is great as long as you're fast, if you're good at spelling. And I'd just like to know in the chat, if you can just give me a yes or a no, can you touch type? Because it's just really interesting to know who's there if you can. So we've got a quick no from Marta. Thank you, Marta, for being quick. We've got a few yeses. So we've got a mix. I don't know anybody, and if you've said yes, you'll feel free to contradict me, but I don't know anybody who can touch type that regrets learning. It's not like, oh, that was a waste of time. I went to the worst comprehensive school in the world, and that's probably the most useful thing that I learned in my time there is how to touch type on a great big typewriter. So if anyone wants to contradict me, feel free to do so in the chat. But it really is very good to learn to touch type. Now, I needed to talk my children into touch typing, and that wasn't easy because it isn't easy to learn to touch type. It takes a bit of effort. And so this is how I talked my son into it. Now, this is a piece of homework he did back in 2013. And he worked very hard on this. He gets very, very bad hand pain. So, you know, he'd written neatly and he actually got a house point. I would write in how long it took him to write it, because other people would be writing like 2 sides of A4 and in the same time. So I wanted the teacher to know, you know, what he has tried. And he did work very hard on this, definitely. And so what I did was for every character he wrote, I copied it into a Word document because I wanted him to see the help he would get if he typed it. And I'm going to show you the help he could get because I'm going to give you a little demo, not only of Word on the desktop, but also Word online. And this is one area where the free version is sometimes better. So desktop is what you pay for. I have Microsoft 365. With that, part of that is Word 365, and I'm going to show you that first, but I'm also going to show you the free version, which you can have on a Chromebook, on an Apple Mac, on an iPad, any sort of tablet. You can even get it on a Kindle Fire. It is completely free and it has some beautiful functionality. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up a Word document. So I'm hoping you guys can see a Word document now. And that's just, now it's the same thing that you've just seen, but I've actually used an open dyslexic font because some children prefer that. I would say about 50% of the students I work with find the dyslexia friendly font really helps them. Personally, it doesn't do a thing for me, but that's just to remind you that that is something that you can do. And this is the work that George worked really hard on. And we see here straight away, he gets help with spelling. Now, we all know about spell check, and we know that if you write it, you don't get help with spelling. We know that dyslexic children find it really hard to look words up in dictionaries. And so spell check is an absolute gift. But for my son, who's very severely dyslexic, if he came here and he right-hand mouse clicked, he wouldn't know which one of those to pick. It would be like eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And the effort of reading what the differences are was too much for him. But if we came here and then said, read aloud.
Everyone, similar to everybody, each, all.
So you have that, and that's in everything really. So if we go freckles as well, we can see what the different options are. So well, they've got the same freckles or freckle. We've got the same thing, but you see that you can have it read aloud. So we also normally see that there is grammar help as well. So we get help with grammar, we get help, which is blue, and we get the red squiggles rather than the blue squiggles, which is help with spelling. Now, what some people don't realize is you also get help with vocabulary if you type your work. So if I take a particular word, say, for example, angry. Now, a lot of children, if they don't read for pleasure, they have a limited vocabulary. And so they find themselves using the same word over and over again when they write. So what they can do is click on the word and then click synonyms. And then they can see, well, instead of angry, I could write mad, irritated, enraged, furious, annoyed. And if that wasn't enough, they could go into thesaurus and see all these other options instead of angry. So we've seen spelling, grammar, and help with vocabulary. But what I love most, and is the thing that I use all the time personally, is you can also listen to what you've written. And that's really important, because what we find is every dyslexic, but myself included, we're very good at reading what we've just written.
The person walking through the door is called Luke, age 11, and must be the tallest boy in class. He's got a mop of red surly hair and freckles, everyone like Luke because he always got joke to tell that makes his laugh.
So
Mr. Fraser.
What I was going to say then, before I was so rudely interrupted, is when I look at the work that I've written, I see what I think I wrote, not what I've written. And when I have it read aloud, I can hear my mistakes. So I teach all the children I work with to always listen to their work and correct it before they hand it in. And they are guaranteed to hand in better work if they listen to it. Now, the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is if you go into the view, you can go into immersive reader. And here I've already set it up that yellow is the background color I like. But here I have the option to change the column width, the background color. Now, this is something else where you can read one line at a time. And this makes more sense when you reading a worksheet rather than your own work. So I won't have that. You can change the spacing. You can put in syllable division. Again, makes more sense when it's a reading or a worksheet rather than reading your own work. You can have that read aloud and you can close. So all I did then was I changed my view. And if a group of children were collaborating on one document, it would not change the document for anybody else. It just changes their view, which is important. So it automatically knew that I liked yellow, I liked wide. This was the size that I liked. So that's what's available to you in the Word demo. But now I'm going to show you what you can do on Word Online. And in some ways, Word Online is even more impressive. So here you see, I'm not on Word in the desktop, I'm on Word Online. I'm just in Microsoft Edge, and here I am. And I see I've got exactly the same information. And in the same way, I can do a spell check and then my spellings. Oh, I see here, I can't have that read aloud. So it is different there, but I've got the Open Dyslexic font. I've got the synonyms again. I can use that. You can definitely get help with vocabulary as well, and you can have it read aloud. But what you have to do to have it read aloud on the Word Online version is, again, you need to go into a different view, and you go into the immersive reader view. And here I've got it set up that I like blue as my background color. But you'll notice there's some other things. There's some more colors coming up in the text and some little labels on top. So let me show you what we can do here. And I didn't show you this before, but you can always change the voice settings. And that was true on the desktop version. So you can change the speed or you could change the voice. So let's go through the options we have here. We can change the text size. We can change the text font. We can change the background color. Don't like that, so I'll go back to what I had. And we can come here, and this is where we can say switch on nouns. So I've taken them all off, but I'm now saying make nouns purple, verbs red, adjectives green, adverbs that mustardy color. But I could have changed that. So dependent on the background color you use, you might find that they clash. So you have the opportunity to change that. And you don't need to have those labels. So we don't need to have the noun or the verb. But I find children really like this. And I like it because I'm able to say to them, give me colourful sentences. How could we make that sentence more colourful? What colour is missing from that sentence? And children find that a really nice way of motivating them to have richer sentences. And then finally, and again, this would be more for a worksheet, is picture dictionary can be switched on. We've got line focus again more with, and when I say a worksheet, in the reading webinar, I showed a chemistry revision booklet that was in Word. And what that did was I just had that emailed to me rather than reading the hard copy. And that's when a picture dictionary, because if the child's written the word, they know the word, they don't need a picture dictionary. But if they get a worksheet that contains a word they don't know, then rather than look it up in a dictionary, they can use the picture dictionary here. So I will show you how that works. So let's have mop. And the other thing that I actually switched on there is I said translate by word into French. And I could have changed that to so I could actually have French with different accents, a Swiss accent, a Canadian accent. I could have picked any other language, German, Austrian German, Swiss German, but let's keep it with French. So we click on mop and we see a picture of a mop, but we can also see how that sounds as well.
Toof.
Doof. And let's see if we can think of another one. Let's say one that laugh. So, and in French it is
Rire.
rire. And it's as simple, if we wanted to change that to German, and then come out and say laugh again. And now it's
Some.
And as somebody who is rubbish at language and having to prepare my children for modern language oral exams, I found that really, really helpful. So I think that's everything I wanted to show you. Let's get back to the presentation and check there's nothing I have forgotten. So I've done Word Desktop and Word Online. And I think I've now listed what I think the advantages are. You get help with spelling and grammar. You can have your spelling options read aloud. We saw that was only in the desktop version. We can improve vocabulary using synonyms or thesaurus. What I didn't show you is you can actually say, make this more concise. Let me see if I can find that for you. I don't think it works particularly well with this example. But let's have a go at this because there is a definite mistake in that one. And let us do right-hand mouse click and give me a rewrite suggestion. And sometimes is Mr. Frakes. So it's corrected it, but I don't think it's corrected it particularly well. But it's given you some different options here, which and you can give feedback. So more and more, and with AI, we'll get more and more help with writing. So that's what I forgot to show you as I went through. But proofreading, listening to your mistakes, and when they're heard, if you correct them, and in the parts of speech isn't in the paid version. The picture dictionary is not in the paid version, but it's in the free Word online version. And I've put something in to remind you of that in the slides when we send those to you. So not only are all the things, the help that I've just talked to you about that you get when you're doing your homework, classwork, coursework, but as well as that, really, you should be able to type a lot faster than you can write. If you learn to type well, you will type a lot faster than you can write, which means in a finite period of time, which exams are all a test of speed, not just a test of knowledge, it means students can write more in the time and therefore they can get more marks. So that speed is important. They don't get the hand pain from typing. The work is legible, which, you know, can be a real problem in exams when they're writing quickly. If the marker cannot read the work, it's hard to give marks. And if you can correct and reorganize without lots of crossing out and arrows, because I know for me, in fact, this next slide kind of shows I'm not a linear thinker. When I see a question, be it in an exam or with coursework, but let's talk about an exam, I start to think, oh, I must include this, I must include this, I must include this. And I teach my students to brain dump everything they can think of that will answer the question, and then go back and read the question and think, okay, from what I've remembered of everything, what would make a good introduction and a good logical second point? And we can cut and paste that information. And then what tends to happen to me is I might be 3 questions on answering a totally different question. And then I think, oh, I should have included that. And then I can go back and include it easily if I type it. So cut and paste is an absolute gift, particularly for people who are not linear thinkers. Brainstorm, organize, reorganize, correct, and add to at a later stage. So if you're anything like me, you'll be thinking, if it's so good, if there are so many advantages, why do so few students type? I mean, a lot of students type, but they're not good typists. And it's like shooting yourself in the foot. It is something that if you just worked on it, it would do really well. So I think I've tried to say some of the reasons why I think this is. I don't think schools know how to teach touch typing anymore. And this is something that I'm teaching the undergraduates and the postgraduates at Kingston, the people that are trained to be teachers. I think a lot of students wrongly believe they can type, and they tell me, no, I can type, I don't need to learn. But what I get them to do is this free 1-minute typing test. Ideally, not looking at the keyboard. And then they see, it tells them at the end of it, oh, well, you type with this many words per minute with this accuracy. And if it's not double their handwriting speed, then really they need to do some work to get their typing a lot better, because they're missing a trick if they don't get faster typing. Sight typing is not touch typing. It really slows you down when you have to check spellings. And given that the exam paper has correct spellings throughout it, it's not good if you then spell that same word 7 different times, you know, different ways as you write it. But students do resist learning, and you cannot force. So it's good for them to understand the advantages, because most students want to do well. And when they understand, look, if you learn to type, you'll do well, but you can't force it when children are too young. It has a detrimental effect. So I would say this is the sweet spot at between 10 and 14. I have taught many children after 14, but once you start the GCSE courses, your head is so full of trying to remember biology, history, English literature, that you haven't got the bandwidth to learn to touch type as well. So, you know, the cooperation goes down. The number of children that I've worked with, now, truthfully, dexterity is better here, much better here, but peer pressure is such that sometimes by the children of 15, 14, 15, they're saying, Miss, I don't want to learn. I'm not going to do well in exams anyway. I'm given up. I just want to be like my friends. And so I think before students go into secondary school, most primary school children are excited about learning to type and they don't mind so much being different. And that's not all, some do mind, but it's not as big a hurdle in primary school. So towards the end of primary school, I would say is ideal, not because dexterity and maturity is great, but because I've seen it too often happen where students won't learn when they get older. So that's everything I was going to tell you about typing. And I've got someone here saying, is there a risk that students get too used to having spelling and grammar help and then this function has to be switched? Yeah, well, instead you can switch it off. I actually teach my students to not have spelling and grammar on as they type. It's very, very easy to switch it off, but only use it at the end. And there's lots of reasons why. I talk about just doing a brain dump of all the things you think you could include in this homework or this coursework. And then once they see that squiggly blue line, they just completely stop. And it kills the flow of ideas. So I say, don't do that. So you need to get used to not having spell check, because you're right, it's a hard access arrangement to get spell check in exams, but it's not a hard access arrangement to get it without spell and grammar check. So you can just switch it off very, very easily. It's in file options, and I can't remember exactly where, but you switch it off as you type. Not switch it off altogether, but you switch it off as you type. I know you said you need to be taught, but what programs would be useful to help? Good question. I actually don't think it matters. About 5, 6 years ago, I did an experiment where I paid maybe 8 or 9 teenagers to learn to type, and I gave them all. They only got paid if they went all the way to the end and learned to type. And I gave them different packages. And there are personal preferences, but I don't think the package makes a difference. And I think for me, I often use free packages because the reporting is very good. And I like to be able to show students how much they've improved. And so I often use typing.com, which is completely free. And I've paid for the paid version. And for me, it didn't make enough difference to have the paid version. I also use Nessie Reading and Nessie Fingers, which is lovely for some students, but some students hate it. So it is about personal preference, definitely. Definitely. Excuse me, somebody's calling me. I don't know why. Oh, I'm in a webinar. Sorry, I shouldn't be called, but I do apologize. So we're now going to talk about dictation. And dictation can be human or electronic. So many a parent will scribe for children, many a teacher will. Maybe a teacher will say, look, I'll write the first sentence and you take on after that. But obviously that takes an awful lot of time. You've only got one teacher or you've only got one TA, so it's very hard. So electronic dictation is absolutely super, and I really do think more people should use it. So now we're going to have a work through these two. So I definitely start early, before children are up to learning to type, but also once they learn to type, I then teach them dictation. For older children, I don't show them dictation until they've learnt to type. And the reason why, we talked about, it's not a simple access arrangement to get. If you're in a hall with lots of other people, you can use a computer reader without disturbing anyone else. You can type without disturbing anybody else, but you can't dictate. And therefore you've got to be in a room on your own. So it's a really, really difficult access arrangement to get. And so I don't want children to become reliant on dictation. because it's so much easier to do than type. So I don't want you to do that. So that's just a quick warning. Don't have children get too dependent on dictation. And just a quick question for you guys is, can you tell me whether any of you are using dictation? Oh, I love English type as well. Someone said, I love English. I got over 50 primary children typing. It is great. English type is brilliant. But the way I work, because I do remote touch, I'm not doing any at the moment. So I'm now concentrating on teaching other people to teach touch typing. But when I did it, I did remote lessons, and English type, the architecture wasn't great, but English type is great. I do think it's lovely. And it was designed by somebody, maybe it was a Senko or someone like that. So it's really good. So dictate, do any of you use dictation yourselves? You've got a son used to. But his pronunciation wasn't good enough. But I think it's really good to force children to start speaking clearly. Now, it's not going to work for anyone, but I will give you a tip later on in the slides for when pronunciation, when it's hard for the dictation to understand. Yes, I think that's the note that we just said, orally rehearse before they attempt to write. Absolutely brilliant. Really, really good strategy. So I'm going to carry on because we haven't got loads of time. But once you start dictating on your phone or your iPod, I haven't used Otter, but a lot of people have told me how brilliant it is. Once you start dictating, it's really hard to go back. And I personally use Dragon Dictate because I've been dictating for a long time and I'm hyper, power user for dictation. And I find the free ones on the whole tend to be too slow, although I do think the iPad and the iPhone are good. And when I say too slow is you can only dictate so much before you have to stop and then dictate again. Whereas with Dragon, I can just keep talking. If I had it going during this, it would transcribe everything I said, and it wouldn't be perfect, but it would be pretty good. So this is what I use, Dragon, the paid version. If we have time, I'll show you the difference between the two. We probably won't have time. And then I've just included some slides that basically say on different devices where to find Dictate, because it's available on everything now. So, where you find it on an iPad or an iPhone, on a Mac, on Google Voice Type, and I am going to show you 365. And I just included some other information for you to help you find stuff, and just to show you that you go into settings and it will tell you how to, this is in Word, how to dictate punctuation as well. And now it's time for I'm not going to do a demo on the iPad because it's almost impossible when you're using Teams, but I can show you. So here is just my iPad. I press that. I then just dictated. I didn't have any additional microphones in. I was in a quiet office, so I didn't need it. And it basically says if a child has difficulty with handwriting, spelling or getting their ideas down on paper, dictation can really help. It's much easier to learn than typing, and it spells everything correctly. And you've noticed that I picked a very large handwriting-like font. And what you can do is you can then make the color a very light gray, and then students can type that out. And if they want to, and we can just hand in the type version, but they could actually trace over that if they wanted to. And then these are two examples on Microsoft Word, but what I am able to do on Word is show those to you. Oh, I thought I had another one open. Let me have a look. No, I haven't. I thought I had. But here we see one where I've used this particular font, and I will do a bit of dictation for you now so you see it. Fingers crossed it will work. Sometimes when you're on Teams, it's not ideal, but here we go. Dictation is very quick. Full stop. I'm a quick typist, but it's much quicker than my typing. Full stop. I can use different fonts. Full stop. I can pick one that is similar to my school's handwriting policy. And we see there's a problem there. They're never perfect, but you always, always need to go back and listen to what you dictated.
I am dictating. Is it working over Teams? Dictation is very quick. I'm a quick typist, but it's much quicker than my typing. I can use different fonts. I can pick one that is similar to my school's handwriting policy.
So you wouldn't necessarily have picked that one up, but never mind. There we go. So that's just a quick dictation. What I like better about, if I can do drag and dictate, and this may or may not work, but we'll have a go. I'm switching it on. I have just switched on Dragon. Full stop, new line. It is much better for typing lots and lots of information. It's also better for punctuation. Full stop, new line. I much prefer it, but it's very expensive. I wouldn't buy it now, as the free stuff is so good. Okay, I'll switch that off, but it just gives you an idea of this. And I'm just going to go back to my slides now. And you'll see that in a busy classroom, it wouldn't be as easy to use because there's so much background noise. So in a quiet classroom, yes, but not in a busy classroom. Definitely not. But something that does help is just a cheap microphone. So having something like this, and there's lots of options on Amazon, just having those around your head and being able to talk there does improve the quality. I prefer this because I get a headache if I wear something like that a long time. And if I'm here on my own, this is great. But in a busy classroom, I would definitely go for something like that. And also, I recommend students bring in their own, not use the school one. And these headsets break really easily, and if they use their own, they use what they're comfortable with, and for hygiene reasons. And I just tend to use their own. It saves using up the school budget on stuff that's going to break. So that's a quick tip. But again, you can't use microphones in an exam like this, so I wouldn't recommend that. So let's just think about this. We've talked about transcription. We haven't talked about this sort of the content or the literacy. But what I do want to point out is these are the neurodiverse weaknesses. You know, my daughter, very dyslexic, was a fantastic writer, but her spelling was rubbish and her punctuation was rubbish, but the quality of what she wrote was amazing. In fact, she writes for a living now, or part of her living is writing now. Now, these are our neurodiverse strengths. This is our higher order thinking. And what tends to happen is earlier in the school, you're always concentrating on literacy. So the dyslexic children are feeling, I'm rubbish, I'm no good at this. And they never get to this point where they can show their ideas because they've already thought, well, I can't spell, I hate writing, my hand hurts. And they think that they're not capable, when in actual fact, if we help them overcome these problems, they could then start using their strengths. So typing provides help in all these areas. It helps with spelling, grammar, vocabulary, and it helps not hurt the hand. It helps it be more legible. So, and dictation the same. And we have a little bit of time. I'm just going to go through this. I still believe in teaching handwriting. I still believe in persevering with handwriting. I just don't think we should rely on handwriting. So why bother? Well, neurologically, writing is different cognitively. And if there's something we need to remember, spelling, better to do it that way, to learn spellings that way, rather than all the lovely apps, because there's something different about writing a k and a a and a t than there is about typing it. So I definitely think, and if I'm revising for exams, these things will stick in your brain better If the stuff I can't remember, I will write it rather than type it. Making sure children have a good pencil grip. I am amazed by how many of the students I teach don't have a good pencil grip. My son and my husband write like this. They have a rubbish pencil grip. They're very bright. It's got nothing to do with intelligence, but it is to do with sore hand. And it's very hard to change a poor pencil grip. But if you can spot it easy, it's really good to do. And I teach my students how to get the right pencil grip, and it's hard to demonstrate not in the flesh. But if you put a pencil down and you pick it up with the wrong end and you flip it, you automatically get the dynamic tripod pencil grip. And doing that, when you write, it only moves your fingers. It's not moving your arm. Whereas when you've got a poor pencil grip, you're moving everything, and it's just not very efficient. So if you're trying to get children to practice using the correct pencil grip, don't be mean and make them write sentences and capital letters and full stops or spelling. Help them do things that's fun. Otherwise, it's just too awful, and they don't want to do that. In early years, don't bother to correct it. It's only when they get to about 4.5 that pencil grip starts to be important. And boys get pencil grip later. Their hands develop in a different way. I was only taught that recently, but I thought I'd pass that on. I've included a little video that helps you. It's an OT, an NHS OT, telling you about different types of pencil grip you can use. And these are just a few products that I found really helpful that you may or may not know about. So I'll show you. I don't know if they're available in South Africa. Hope they are. But I have two lefties. And what the lefties tend to do is they tend to sort of spread the ink around and it looks awful. And these were really good for my children. And a lot of schools don't allow you to use them at the higher end of the school, but the lower end of the school, they can be rubbed out and they do not rub. So they are fab. This paper is absolutely fab, and I've got a video here of my hero Neil Mackay saying about what a huge difference they make. And in the video, he talks about creating these pads themselves, but you can now buy them on Amazon. You can buy them with big, thick lines for younger children and thinner lines for older children. And also you can get this raised line paper. So it's a way that children can feel the difference in the lines, and that really does seem to help. So we've covered everything we were going to cover about writing difficulties. Next month, we're going to look at memory and self-esteem. And that's everything really. The numbers are very low this evening, so I will carry on doing. We need your help to sort of just spread the word that this is free training. There's no, very often when people run free training, it's with a view to, well, you've got to sign up now and you get this special low price. There's no strings. We're not after anything. We just want to get this information out to as many people as possible. So if you know anybody who would benefit, maybe point them in the direction of the recording or tell them about our next one. And that just finishes off now with ask me any questions you might have. Any questions? You can switch off your mic or you can put them in the chat. Feel free to ask away, but if not, we could finish 5 minutes early. Natalie's just put in the link to register for the next one. How best to approach getting laptop for use in secondary school? It differs dependent. Why is the school saying? Is the school saying you can't use a laptop?
No, my question is, my daughter will be going up to she's in year 6, so she'll be going up to secondary school. And I want it to be her preferred method of working. So is that something that I need to supply as a parent?
It depends on the school.
Is it something that the school?
As a parent, I would be absolutely prepared to do that because it makes such a big difference. But it depends on the school. Some schools give every child a device. I find too often they're in their backpacks and they're not being used. But post-COVID, an awful lot of schools do have devices. So I think it's just start the conversation with the Senko now.
Right. Okay. I will. Once she finds out her school, I will. Thank you very much.
And I think that's a way of also trying to work out which is the best fit school, because if you have a school that's really into tech, that's much better. Really, and if everyone has a laptop, then it makes it so much easier for a child not to be the odd one out. So that's lovely.
Yeah, that's my worry. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. But I think when children realize how much it helps them and the help they get, that's what turned my son around. Spelling, grammar, can listen to it. I can do it quicker. It doesn't hurt my hand. He worked out himself. It was worthwhile. Touch, type, read and spell. Yes, I have come across it. I bought a license for a group of boys I was working with. An awful lot of research has gone into it, but I found it very dull. So it's very good at spelling, getting the muscle memory for IGHT or OUGH. So it's very good at that. It's definitely designed with dyslexia in mind, but I just don't find it fun. And maybe could have ADHD as well. I don't find it as good, but I found when I switched those boys onto one that had more games, they practice more often. And it's all about getting children to practice. So if you've got good children that will do as they're told and practice, TTRS is great. But if they're not so good, then it's harder to motivate them. Any other questions? It's what oh, is that TTRS that someone says it's a it is a phonics based program. Yes. So any other questions? Lots of games. Nessie Fingers has lots of games. English Type Junior has lots of games. Maybe by 12-year-olds, you might just be on English Type, not English Type Junior, but have a look at them both. Typing Club has lots of games and it's free. Typing.com has lots of games, but they're outside of the lessons. And what you don't want is for the child just to play the games and not do the lessons. And that is the danger with typing.com. So the free version that's got the most games would be Typing Club. But none of them are expensive. So Nessie Reading and Spelling, I can't remember how much it is a year, but I think it's about £30 a year. I don't think English Type is much more than that. And for schools, they're always much cheaper, always. Any other questions? I think that might, that's great. So
sorry, Caroline.
No worries.
I think there is like another question asking about the touch typing club at school. Is that something that you can?
Touch typing club at school, what should they be doing? That's almost a separate. I have, let me, I tell you what probably might be the easiest thing to do in that case is if I go on, before I started working with Kingston University and the Driver Youth Trust, I had my own consultancy and I have a web page on my consultancy. And this is the Achieve Now web page. And I don't want you to hear that. But if we go into playlists, I have one on touch typing. Let's see if it comes up. Right. How long does it take to learn? Right. This is a playlist, viewfill playlist. And what I will do is I will share that, copy, and I will put that in here. And in there, I share lots of tips and tricks on teaching touch typing. So the biggie is don't let them look at the keyboard. You've got to find a way of them practicing without looking at the keyboard. And you've got to find ways of helping students know which finger to use. So I use color stickers. I use color bands that match the stickers. So there's lots of little tips like that. The biggest one, I think, is learn the full keyboard straight away. And that's hard, but once you do that, you can do a time test. And once you've learned you can do a time test, you can see how much you've improved. And while learning to type is a pain, you improve very, very quickly. And when students see how much they've improved, it motivates them to carry on. You know, I was typing 4 words a minute, and now I'm typing 8 words a minute. Wow, that's amazing, you know, and they will keep going. And if you've got little rewards, it's all about motivation and reward, I think. So I hope that that helps you. And I think we're now at 7 o'clock. So thank you for your attention. Anything you can do to get the word out, we would be very, very grateful. And I will get these the PowerPoint slides out to you very soon. I always try to get them out before the weekend, but we have processes at our end to get the recording up on the website, and I don't send them out till the recording's up on the website, so I can then say the recording is available. So thanks for your attention, and I hope to see you in a month's time. See you. Bye-bye.